Stephen A. Smith Show starts right now.
To the hottest theater shows and more. Vivid Seats has it all. Download the app and join the Vivid Seats Rewards loyalty program today. Also, the Stephen A. Smith Show is being brought to you by the new Shell V-Power Nitro Plus Premium Gasoline, now with 4 levels of defense against gunk, wear, corrosion, and friction. As promised, it is my honor and privilege to have my next guest on the line. Does an outstanding job covering the National Football League for the worldwide leader. Did so for years before departing for a short while. Honored to have him back. The great reporter himself, the one and only Mr. Ed Werder, is on the line with yours truly. What's going on, Ed? Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Good to be on with you, Stephen A. I appreciate the invite.
Absolutely.
I'm doing well. I'm still with the Colts, so I'll probably finish up here today, go back to Dallas, and find out the Zeke thing is in need of instant coverage.
How about that? We get ready to get right into all of that. But first, I want to ask you: you heard the news when you heard the news that Andrew Luck was electing to retire. What entered your mind? What are the kind of thoughts that came through your mind as somebody covering this league for as long as you have?
Well, I was in the press box at Jerry World covering the Cowboys and Texans game when I looked down press row in the press box and saw people reacting with various levels of astonishment as they looked at their phones and then investigated that and saw that Adam Schefter was reporting that Andrew Luck was retiring, and I immediately tried to confirm that it really was Schefter's account and that somebody hadn't taken it over because it did really seem somewhat unfathomable given his youth, given that the season he had just had. I mean, statistically, it was the best season he had ever had in his first year under Frank Reich's offense. And all the promise that they showed at the end of the season, it just seemed hard to believe. I knew he had the lingering injury and that they were having a hard time diagnosing it and resolving it. But I just don't think anybody expected that this was going to be the end result.
So in the aftermath of learning that he has retired, I mean, nosing around the way that you do and having the multitude of sources that you have in the National Football League, it's one thing for it to be the injuries, the numerous things that he's had, the shoulders, the lacerated kidneys, etc. But he alluded to it being something else, something more mental. Have you gained some perspective on exactly what he was going through that led to him retiring a week and a half before the NFL season began, as opposed to the start of training camp or maybe even sometime earlier?
Well, I mean, I understand the criticism in terms of the timing and the negative effect that has on a football team that's just, 2 weeks from starting the regular season. But I really think it was, his expectation that the injury was going to be resolved at some point and the pain was going to go away and he was going to be able to play without being impaired. And that just never happened. And he said himself that he never really considered retiring from football until 2 weeks from the time that he actually did it. And he was so committed to that course of action that the Colts did have a conversation with him that involved, Chris Ballard, the general manager, Jim Irsay, the owner of the team, and the head coach, Frank Reich, in which they proposed, well, let's see if we can take it. We'll put you on IR. Let's see if we can get this resolved over, a certain space of time during the course of the season and then bring you back. But leave ourselves that option. And he just wanted nothing to do with it. He was, at that point, his mind was made up that he didn't love football anymore, the way he was having to play it, what he was having to put into it, the pain he was enduring in every phase of his life. And so he just decided that at this point, at least, he was better off without it permanently.
So did they elect to leave him be? Probably presuming that he'll change his mind and ultimately he'll come back maybe in a year, 2 years max? Or is it one of those situations that they're resigned to the fact that he has spoke with such definitiveness that they don't think there's any way that Andrew Luck is going to change his mind and elect to come back to the game of football?
Well, they put him on reserve retired, and I don't know what the terms and conditions were of the settlement that they reached in terms of the $24 million unpaid dollars in his contract, but I assume that during the process of negotiating all of that, the Colts have been very careful to protect their rights to Andrew Luck going forward, because either, if he comes back, they would want to be open to the possibility of having him be their quarterback, or if they've somehow replaced him adequately in their own minds, he would certainly have a trade value. So I'm sure the Colts will be involved in that if it ever comes to it. But, I talked to a person who was very close to Andrew, who said that at this point they're convinced that he views this as a permanent retirement, that it's not going to be a Brett Favre type thing where, he regrets this and misses the game and decides to come back. He's wired differently than, the Peyton Mannings and the Brett Favres and Drew Brees. He's a different guy. And I'm not saying he won't change his mind, but I'm answering your question, and I think that was about how the Colts are moving forward. I think they're moving forward believing that he's done, and they'll prepare this season and in the future accordingly. And if that changes, they'll address it at the time.
ESPN national reporter Ed Werder on the line right here with Stephen A. ESPN Radio, ESPN News. Let's transition to the Dallas Cowboys. You heard Marshall Faulk, who went to Cabo and was training with Ezekiel Elliott. He spoke to you. He told you that it really, really comes down to whether or not the Dallas Cowboys are willing to have Ezekiel Elliott miss games just because he wants to be the highest paid running back in football. I'm paraphrasing here. Talk to me based on your conversations with Faulk and others about what Ezekiel Elliott's mindset appears to be at this particular juncture as we close in on starting the 2019 NFL season.
Well, as far as I know, nobody's spoken directly to Ezekiel Elliott since he went into exile in this contract holdout. And so the next best thing is talking to people who interact with him directly. And one of those has become Marshall Faulk, the Hall of Fame running back, who also was represented by Rocky Arsenault, the agent who represents Eric Dickerson and represents Ezekiel Elliott. Mm-hmm. And so he's been in Cabo. He's been training with Elliott. He said he's, doing game type activities that do everything but simulate contact, which is impossible, and obviously the biggest part of the whole thing when he does come back. But his goal in this is to make sure that Zeke is physically as ready as he can be when he does come back and the contract is resolved, to take his place in the starting lineup as quickly as possible. I think it's worth noting, Stephen A., that when he went to Cabo in 2017 during his 6-week suspension, when he came back, he was immediately successful. He rushed like 24 times for 97 yards against the Seahawks, and then he had a 27 carries for 103 yards against the Eagles. And doing that despite the fact that the Cowboys felt he was 5 to 10 pounds overweight. So I think that's the reason that Marshall has been asked to come in and help, push him that little bit, try to bridge that gap. The other person who's talked to Elliott is his position coach. That's Gary Brown. He's a former NFL running back. Mm-hmm. He has a very good relationship with Zeke, and he told me that they talk about every other day. He said Zeke's doing his work. He's in his playbook. He knows what's going on with the team. He's interacted with them about the development of the young players, including Tony Pollard, who's been talked about a lot by the Cowboys. And he misses the game, and he loves his teammates, and he wants to come back as soon as possible. But he feels that he has earned being the highest paid running back in football. And the Cowboys feel like when they drafted him 4th overall, one of the things you get with a first-round pick is 5 years of contractual control. And they're willing to do a contract with 2 years remaining. They've done it with Tyron Smith. They just did it with Jalen Smith last week. What they aren't willing to do is do a contract 2 years early and make him the highest-paid player at the running back position, surpassing Todd Gurley. They think that contract by the Rams was a mistake and an aberration.
So when Jerry Jones, I know you got to get ready to get on out of here, but I'm looking at Jerry Jones, I'm looking at Stephen Jones. Jerry Jones seems to be drawing a hard line in the sand. Stephen Jones seems to be more optimistic. Is there an argument that can be made that they're not necessarily on the same page as it pertains to Ezekiel Elliott, or are they marching in lockstep with one another as to what should be done to compensate this young man?
I don't think that I've really detected that they are in disagreement about his value at this point. Okay. We know they had a difference of opinion on players like Deion Sanders, that they had a difference of opinion on Johnny Manziel. Mm-hmm. I haven't sensed that yet, and it's not over, so it could still get to that point, or it could reveal itself if they've concealed it. But it's hard to predict what they're going to do because on one hand, right, you have their history. And their history has been that once before Jerry was put in this situation by Emmitt Smith. Emmitt Smith didn't have a contract. He had honored his contract and was not satisfied with what the Cowboys were offering. And Jerry had a defending Super Bowl champion that started the season without the league's reigning rushing champion.
Right.
So he's not in a much different situation now, is Jerry. He'd be taking a similar gamble. The question is, what did he learn from that he decides to apply to his current situation? I look at it like this. Jerry Jones is soon to be 76 years old. Mm-hmm. They have what they think is the best roster in terms of talent and depth that they've had since they won 3 Super Bowls in the 90s. Okay. They have a head coach in Jason Garrett that Jerry really wants to succeed, has really stuck with against all manner of public opinion.
But didn't extend
and
him.
He's been put in the last year of his contract. Right. He's coaching for his job, and he's doing it with a first-year offensive coordinator calling plays. So on top of all of that, playing 2 division games to start the season, do you really want to deprive these people in this team of the player it was all built around? I just think ultimately Jerry's got to give on this.
Ed Werder, appreciate you. Great work as always. I know you got to run and do some TV. Thank you, buddy. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. Great to talk to you. Thanks,
all right,
Stephen.
You too. The one and only Ed Werder. I cannot express to y'all how happy I am to have him back. He does an outstanding job for ESPN. He has always done an outstanding job for us throughout the years, and it's great that he's back in the family covering what he loves to cover. That's the NFL overall, and in particular the Dallas Cowboys. It is absolutely phenomenal and fabulous to have Ed Werder back. He was right here with Stephen A., ESPN Radio, ESPN News, 888-SAY-ESPN. That's 888-729-3776. And let's dissect that last part about what Ed Werder just broke down, because it's incredibly important. He gave you a little bit of history there. Him and Stephen Jones didn't agree on Deion Sanders, didn't agree on Johnny Manziel. Okay, they were on opposite sides. Stephen Jones, the son, Jerry Jones, the father, but they don't appear, at least as of yet, to be on different sides of the fence when it comes to Ezekiel Elliott. Ezekiel Elliott, by all accounts, is fixated on being the highest paid running back in football. He thinks he deserves to be paid more than Todd Gurley. How do all of y'all feel about that? You know the number, 888-SAY-ESPN. That's 888-729-3776. Then there's this nugget. There's this nugget to consider. You're Jerry Jones. You are approaching 76 years of age. You have been open, honest, and public about the fact that your best years are behind you. Time is running out. You ain't necessarily the man you used to be. You understand? Your mortality is staring you in the face. Yet here you are with the best roster that you've had since you won Super Bowls up to 1995. Not only that, you've got an all-world running back. Not only that, the backdrop of Emmitt Smith holding out, missing the first 2 games in 1993 before you ultimately had to pay him. You went 0-2. Jimmy Johnson was there, flabbergasted and frustrated beyond comprehension as to you and your ways with this. He needed his running back, his star running back, and ultimately after 2 games, he got him. Then you got the Jason Garrett situation. I'm no fan of Jason Garrett. I don't think he's that great of a coach. I certainly don't think he's the right coach for this job. But Jerry Jones loves the man and has wanted to give the man every opportunity, but was smart enough not to extend him. So Jason Garrett, without question, is coaching for his job. And he's got a first-year offensive coordinator. And Ezekiel Elliott ain't there. You're Jerry Jones, even Ed Werder, who's as diplomatic, down the middle, and objective as they come. Even he said, quote, at some point, Jerry Jones has got to give in to this. That tells me that everybody believes Ezekiel Elliott is the one with the leverage, not Jerry Jones. I'm not sure about that, but I respect the hell out of it coming from Ed Werder, I'll tell you that much. Back to the phones we go. 888-SAY-ESPN. George, talk to me.
Yeah, I think Zeke will come back, but I was wondering about that 18 games that you were talking about. Why don't they just cut the preseason out altogether and add 20 games? And like one of your previous callers said, just have the 3 bye weeks in between, so if guys get hurt or suspended or whatever.
I don't think they're gonna propose getting rid of preseason because you need exhibition games in every sport before you go out there and do the real thing, just to make sure that you work out some of the kinks or whatever the case may be. Remember, Major League Baseball, you got spring training. Basketball, you got preseason exhibition games. Okay, and so when it comes to football, you're going to want and need the same things. In the sport of golf, in the sport of tennis, you have tournaments that are basically perceived as being exhibitions because they're nowhere nearly as important as other tournaments. So exhibition play seems to matter in every single sport, and I think it matters with the National Football League, and they'll never eradicate it. Totally.
Well, the only reason I said that is because I was thinking like college, they just, come right out the gate, and play.
Yeah, but you got to remember college
no
football, they practice with each other. It's kids, and it's forgivable because it's amateurism. So the perception of it being amateurs, and as a result, the demands placed on their shoulders are far less than that of paid professionals is where it comes into play. You can see a college kid not measure up, and you can forgive it because they're kids. You ain't trying to hear that nonsense when it comes to pro sports. The money that they charge, the money that the players are getting paid, et cetera, et cetera. You want excellence, or you want peak performances. You don't want to see somebody that you looking at, you going like this, I can play better than him. You can tolerate that with kids. It's hard to do with professionals.
I feel you on that. I feel you.
All right, man. Thanks a lot for the call, buddy. Appreciate it. Leroy, you're live with Stephen A. Talk to me.
Hey, Stephen, I got a Jacoby Brissett question,
Sure.
man. All right, being as though the Colts are willing to pay Andrew Luck $24-25 million to sit home, do you think that Jacoby Brissett's agent will be wrong to fight for more money for him this year?
Nope. Let me say this to you. He can fight for more money because that's his job as an agent. He ain't going to get it until the brother produces. Now, Jacoby Brissett is 26 years of age. But remember, his 1 year in Indianapolis where he was the man, starting in place of an Andrew Luck who sat out for the entire season, Jacoby Brissett was 4-11, completed 58% of his passes, threw for 3,000 yards but 13 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. Some would say with numbers like that and a QBR of 41, you're lucky to have a damn job. So it's not like he's in a position of leverage. You can try, but the fact of the matter is if I'm Ballard, if I'm Irsay, if I'm Frank Wright, I need you to go out there and prove yourself and prove that you can lead this team before you're in any kind of position to strong-arm me about more money.
Hey, thank you, man.
Take it easy. Let's go to Hassan. You're live with Stephen A. What's up, man?
Hey, Stephen A., this is Hassan from Indianapolis.
Yes, sir.
I have admired you and your work for over the years, and I respect everything that you do with journalism. But there's one thing I have a problem with. Yesterday on your show, you said you thought the fans were kind of okay in booing Andrew as he walked off the field.
Yeah,
I thought that was so disrespectful in the way that Andrew had given so much of himself to this organization, to this city. And just because it got leaked out that he was retiring, that man has a right to retire, just like any of us that has retired.
Well, let me respond to your direct, come at me. What I was trying to say is, in that moment, when you learn that this guy is walking away from the game, I understand it. I don't think that they were wrong, and I don't think that they should be excoriated for it. I think that it was a natural reaction. Yes, I don't think they would do that today. I don't think they would have done that yesterday. But I think in the moment Saturday, when you're looking at this offensive line, when you're looking at Mack in the backfield, when you're looking at the offensive line led by Quentin Nelson, when you're looking at T.Y. Hilton having Funches and Ebron available to him, and this kid Paris Campbell, if I remember correctly, that they drafted out of Ohio State and the kind of capabilities that he has, and you're hoping beyond hope that your expectations will potentially reach fruition, and it's the best chance that Andrew Luck has had since he's arrived in the NFL in 2012 of capturing the Super Bowl. And a week and a half before the NFL season begins, you're going to retire. I can understand why people in that moment are booing. So I understand and I appreciate where Aaron Rodgers was coming from, that bad man that he is. You know how much I love that brother. I appreciate where he was coming from, where he talked about it was disgusting, et cetera, et cetera. I think all of you are right if folks held that position after Andrew Luck's press conference, held that position 24 hours later, held that position now, a week later, a month later. You're absolutely right. But I think in that moment, I don't view them as even booing him. I view them as booing like, what the hell is going on? What are you doing? What do you mean you're leaving? It's a week and a half before the season. We got a Super Bowl to capture. What the hell is going on? I can understand that emotion ultimately engulfing you and taking over for a few minutes. I truly can.
Okay, I can understand what you're saying as far as a week and a half before the season. But he had probably no idea at that point that back in March, February, or whatever, that he was going to retire.
Yeah, but that's not my point.
He was going to get healed.
But that's not my point. My point is, as a fan, you're not thinking about that in the moment. You think about that once you go home and eat dinner. You think about when you left the arena and you went out and you got a drink. You'll think about that as you listen to his press conference and listen to him tell, the audience, I was hurt. I heard those boos and it hurt me. And then you reflect on what he's done for you as the successor to Peyton Manning and the greatness that he put on display when he's healthy. I have no doubt that after those few initial moments, you'd have an elevated level of appreciation like Hassan has for what he's done. But in that moment, with diehard fans that don't give a damn, I mean, they're about the only ones that care about preseason. And they're there in attendance and looking forward to a Super Bowl caliber season. And this man retires after 2 weeks earlier telling Peter King, I'm going to play week 1. I can understand you like, what the hell is going on here? I can understand that, man. I really can.
And I respect you, Stephen A. Keep up your good work and what you do and what you bring to us as an audience. I'm a Dodger fan.
Oh man, you shouldn't have said that. Yankees, man. Go ahead. You know what? Y'all welcome to come to another World Series and lose, bro. You welcome.
But I love you the same.
Appreciate it, man.
Day,
thank you, man. You do the same. Appreciate the love. 888-SAY-ESPN. It's 888-729-3776. More of the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio. Coming right at you in a minute.